There are few people that we welcome to our airwaves who need no introduction at all. But writer Margaret Atwood is one such person, a paragon of Canadian literature with books and awards too many to name here, and whose novel, The Handmaid's Tale, is now an Emmy Award-winning television series of the same name. And with that, we're delighted to welcome Margaret Atwood back to our airwaves from the Annex in the provincial capital to talk about democracy, past, present, and future. And it's so good to see you again. How are you?
Very well, and how are you, Steve?
Not bad considering the circumstances, I think is the answer I get to say most times over the past 15 months or so. I think you have fessed up in the past to the fact that you have voted for, I think, 4 different parties on the national scene. So why don't we start with this? Am I talking to one of the rare, persuadable, ecumenical voters left in Canada?
That's right. So I look at what people actually say they're going to do. And I also look at whether in the past we've got any information as to whether they actually did what they said they were going to do. And I vote according to that and also to who's running in my riding.
So many people seem to be very tribal today in how they vote. Why are you not one of those people?
I don't think I've ever been very tribal, and I was brought up by the scientists, and I have a respect for evidence and what we used to old-fashionedly refer to as facts.
Yeah, facts are still fashionable on this program. I'll let you know that right off the top here. We like facts. Facts are friendly. You have participated in, if you add municipal, provincial, and federal, dozens of elections over the years. Can you recall which election gave you the most joyous jolt?
They don't give me joyous jolts. They give me sighs of relief sometimes, but not exactly joy. So does it have to be a Canadian election?
Well, I was thinking of that, but if you've got something in mind elsewhere, I'm all ears.
Well, I think Biden was pretty good. That was a big sigh of relief. Not that it's over, but 4 more years of what they had just had would have probably meant an even flimsier democracy than they currently have south of the border. And of course, everything washes over onto us. Trends do that.
Mm-hmm. Do I infer from that the 2016 U.S. election was your least favorite in your lifetime?
It was a surprise. The Al Gore election was pretty disappointing, and talk about iffy election results. So that was disappointing, and things would have been very different had he won. But 2016, I looked at the closing remarks of the 2 candidates, and I thought, this is not going to be a slam dunk for Hillary Clinton.
You were right about that.
Well, yeah, this person had a very persuasive television manner. And you can never rule that out. However, it did affect my own personal future, in that had the Handmaid's Tale television series launched into a world in which Hillary Clinton was the president, the reaction to it would have been quite different.
Now, that's fascinating. You're going to have to let me follow up on that, because I wonder if, in hindsight, you'd have been prepared to make the trade-off of Hillary as president and no success for Handmaid's Tale, or let's say a lot less, versus Trump as president and your book/TV show goes through the roof. Which option?
Well, I would have taken the Hillary as president, of course. I'm too old to be too worried about the success of these sorts of ventures of mine, but I think it would have been a well-received show anyway, because it was very well made and pretty gripping, but the emotional connection with it would have been different. It would have been, look what we missed by a hair, rather than, oh, look out, here it comes, like that.
How about in Canada? What was your least favorite election outcome in Canada?
Oh, I don't like to be mean to politicians that are out of power. But Stephen Harper getting elected was not a moment of great happiness for me.
Now, you're not putting Trump and Harper in the same bucket, are you?
No, 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 no. I would never do that. No. Harper is a far different sort of person. Harper was not a reality denier on the level, and Harper's voters were not reality deniers on the level of this thing that's going on in the States. Nowhere near. So we didn't see any storming of the Capitol. We didn't see any, I really won the election and it was stolen from me, from Harper. That is not the kind of politician that he was.
I wonder if part of the reason, and I think last time you and I talked, I put this to you and you didn't disagree with me, so I'm going to stick with this. I've always seen you as a bit of like a Bill Davis red Tory. And my hunch is that you don't have much time for Stephen Harper because he, along with Preston Manning, essentially put a stake through the heart of the old Progressive Conservative Party of Canada, and that's why you don't like him. Am I close on this?
I'll take it. I don't think I'm exactly a red Tory either, although certainly Graham said that that's what he always was, but he, because the red Tories kind of ceased to exist, he therefore went either Green or NDP. So, yeah, a lot of the things that the red Tories did when they were there would now be considered Green or NDP-ish. And that's the kind of thing that the newly rearranged Conservative Party was against.
There certainly is a lot of overlap in that Venn diagram.
Yeah, so whatever you may think of Mulroney, he was a conservationist. He understood that. He did that.
Got the prize for being the greenest prime minister of the last half century.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
That's why I look at what people do and say rather than just the tribal aspects.
Mm-hmm. I wonder if you've had a chance yet to meet the current Premier of Ontario.
You mean Doug Ford?
Doug Ford is his name, yes. Now, I know why you did that, because once upon a time when he was on Toronto City Council, he said he wouldn't know you if he bumped into you on the street. So you're just pretending a bit not to know him there. I get it. Good job.
Okay. No, well, actually, he did at that time because he hadn't been elected as anything yet. He did jump out from behind a palm tree after he had done that to show that we were all palsy-walsy, and all of a sudden there was somebody doing a photo op of the two of us. So, yes, I did get ambushed by Doug Ford at one point. But I forestalled any negative comment by putting that on Twitter and saying, somebody jumped at me from out behind a palm tree. I'm a mean person.
Well, he's been in power 3 years. We're less than a year to the next Ontario election. Do you have a view as to how well he's doing?
Well, what is this thing about not being able to buy ad time when you want to? This is something new.
He has used the notwithstanding clause of the Constitution to set aside a court decision so that he can put his campaign election expenses law back in as opposed to the one Kathleen Wynne put in.
So why is that not Stalinist?
Well, it's legal. I mean, the notwithstanding clause, I'm not taking position on it, obviously, but there is a clause in the charter that allows you to do it, and he's done it.
Yeah. Let's see how favorably that is received by voters. Because to me, that's autocratic, and you are restricting voters' rights to know, and you're restricting other entities' ability to spend the money that they have raised to do their campaigning. You're restricting that. So is he going to restrict that for himself as well?
Well, there are strict rules in place now for everybody, for political parties and for third parties, teacher unions, other unions, Ontario Proud, all these other groups. They've all got strict rules they've got to follow right now.
Well, I guess that doesn't extend to ordinary people who are not organizations using, for instance,
oh, it does actually.
Media.
If you wanted to raise $600,000 and spend it within a year of the next election, which we're at right now, I guess we're about 50 weeks to go, you could do it if you wanted.
Yeah, but what if I wasn't raising any money? What if I was just expressing myself?
That's
How
still
about that?
allowed.
Is that allowed?
That's
I'm
allowed.
so happy. I'm so happy to hear that.
We're still in a democracy, last I checked.
Oh, goody.
Well, okay, and let me follow up with this then, because we've talked about tribalism and we've talked about how so many people in politics nowadays seem to want to go to their respective corners and not engage, not compromise, not discuss anymore. They just want to hurl insults at each other. How much do you fear, as Yeats put it, that the center will not hold?
Well, I don't think we've been in a period so much like the 30s since the 30s. So there was some of that in the 50s with McCarthyism, but that was a different kind of show. Yeah, I think things are getting quite polarized, and what happens when extremisms get going is they want to eliminate the middle. So they want to eliminate people like me who reserve judgment and want to hear what they actually are proposing, rather than just going into essentially something that resembles a football team cheering section. So yeah, you see extremists pushing one another into more extreme position on the "look how pure I am" agenda. And if you want to read about those kinds of things happening, you can go back and look at what was happening during the 30s, or you can read about the Red Guards in China who pushed each other further and further, and then ended up in factions and killing one another. So are the extremists killing the kinds of political parties, reasonable sorts of people, more or less? Are they killing those kinds of parties?
That's a great question. Have you got an answer?
Nope. I'm counting on the resilience and reasonableness of average, middle-of-the-road voters.
Who are fewer and fewer today, it seems.
I'm not sure that's true. I think they're more and more silent, simply because they don't want to be attacked as namby-pamby by their own parties.
I wonder if you foresaw some of this, and we're going back many decades now. I think it was in the middle 1980s when you started to think about or started to write *Handmaid's Tale*. And you know, this was at a time where the world, actually, as the 80s progressed, where the Berlin Wall eventually came down and the Soviet Union disappeared, and it looked like democracy was doing rather well. And yet you're thinking about a dystopian time.
It's true.
At that time. Did you have a notion that democracy was going to be fragile nearly 4 decades down the road?
It's always fragile. It's a very fragile governing form. So each governing form has its own fragilities. Monarchies that depend on an heir, you know, somebody who's going to be the next king, they're very fragile. They're vulnerable to not having a successor. Then you got civil wars. So yeah, democracies are always going to be somewhat fragile depending on the rules, and depending on whether you allow super PACs and whether you, I think the first big decision was in the 19th century, in which corporations were deemed to have the same rights as people. Not only a bad decision, but an unreal decision, because corporations are not people. So how much is a democracy subject to the pressure of lots and lots and lots and lots of money? And we have tried to take steps in Canada to limit that. And you can look south of the border and see what happens when you don't limit that.
I would like to follow up and ask you a bit of a chippy question related to the North American electorate. And that is, you know, pollsters tell us that anywhere from 20 to 40% of the electorate maybe a little more some days. Well, frankly, don't think a lot about multiculturalism, don't think that gender fluidity is a real thing, are not fans of increased immigration. And I guess I want to ask you, what kind of voice do you think people who believe that are entitled to have in this democracy?
Same voice as anybody else. They get a vote. So, you know, that's how democracies are supposed to work. So if 80% thought that and elected the government, then that would be the government they had elected. And you and I might not like that, but it would be a result of the democratic process. So as I've said, every governing form has got its fragilities, and that's one of them. They don't always produce something that you or I might approve of.
Do you think progressive people...
But they have produced it, yeah.
Right. Do you think progressive people need to take any responsibility for, and this does happen in some cases, I'm not alleging it in this case, but for, you know, kind of shoving people who believe that, shoving their noses in issues which encourage them to explode back?
Well, first of all, I don't like the word progressive.
Okay, what should we say?
Why is that? Because it is based on a belief that progress is inevitable, that there's such a thing as the right side of history and that you have to be on it. And neither of those things are true. So history doesn't have sides. And all you have to do is go back and look at it, and one day you're on, quotes, the right side of history, and the next day you're not. It's more like the revolving wheel of fortune. One day you're up, the next day you're down. Public opinion changes. Things that were approved of 50 years ago are now something nobody would ever do. So it's like that, but progress is not inevitable, and it's very dependent on material conditions. So when there's lots to go around, you're more likely to get tolerant public opinion. When there's less to go around, people get scared. And you witness the hoarding of toilet paper during the first phases of the pandemic. You know, my toilet paper, you may not have my toilet paper. This toilet paper is mine. So it goes like that. And unless you can unify people and say, all right, we're going to have, it's World War II, we're going to have ration tickets for the toilet paper, or the butter, sugar, meat, and cheese, some people are going to hoard, because that's what people do. So yeah, material abundance, you get a more tolerant society as long as the money is spread reasonably horizontally. If it's all concentrated at the top, as has increasingly happened, you're going to have a very discontented lower layer. And that's when you get the French Revolution.
Well, it sounds to me, and if I've drawn an incorrect inference, I know you'll tell me so, but it sounds to me like you disagree with Martin Luther King, who said history's arrow is always pointing towards justice. You're disagreeing with Barack Obama, who said, yes, we take one step backwards, but then two steps forward. He seems to think there's an inevitability that we're going to end up in the right place. You don't agree?
Yeah, but those people were cheering on their troops. So I don't have any troops. I need to cheer them on. Not standing for election. I would love to believe those things, but evidence does not necessarily bear them out. I think we have to act as though it's possible for the arrow to always point upwards. We have to act that way, because if we give up on that and don't do anything, it's going to point the other way. So particularly in the area of let's make it possible for the human species to continue living on this planet, I have to believe that's possible, or else I would stop making any effort in that direction. So sure, the Easter Bunny exists, hoppity hop. You know it doesn't really, but you have to act as though it might be possible.
Well, some people think Trumpism happened because America just got too much change too quickly, too radically, and therefore there was, what's that law, I guess Newton's law, every action has an equal and opposite reaction, and there you go.
Sure.
You buying that?
Sure. No, not entirely. I think he tapped into something that was already happening, and he leveraged that, and made a deal out of it. But unless people were open to those kinds of emotions anyway, unless they're already open to those emotions, he wouldn't have got any traction. So I think he happened partly because he was an entertainer. So people had fun at his rallies. It was fun. You could let off steam. You could, wear hats. You could act as if you were at a sports event, really. And the other politicians, not having a background in entertainment television as he did, the other candidates couldn't do that. So that's how he got rid of all of the other Republicans, and how he didn't actually win the popular vote against Hillary Clinton.
No, neither time.
No, but he was able to get enough electoral votes to be able to do that, and I think that happened partly because he went to places that she had taken for granted and tapped into people's dissatisfaction with the fact that they were being overlooked. So I don't think it's let's blame the victim on diversity and gender identity and all those things. I think those are distractions about why he may have won. I think he won because he went to those places and said, "I have not forgotten you."
I did mention off the top that we were going to talk politics past, present, and future, and we've done two of those things, so let's do the third one now. Why do you think it is that despite all of the wondrous technology that surrounds us, and you've become quite proficient on social media yourself, and the amazing technologies that are no doubt still to come in the future, that there seems to be at the moment a lot of fear and not all that much excitement about the future? How come?
Well, I think it has a lot to do with the fact that the message of the environmentalists, which was known to biologists back in the 50s, has finally penetrated popular consciousness, and we are also seeing a lot of weird climate and weather events right now. So that is, I think, one of the reasons that people are worried about the future. And I would put it number one, top of the list. And in the United States of America, I think the fact that it is so divided against itself right now, at a time when, if it does not pull up its socks, you're going to see the dominance of China in the next 50 years. So I think that makes people question the number one, preeminence of the United States, number two, the coherence and stability of the United States and its own. And one thing it used to be very good at doing was boosterism. Let's have a big 4th of July parade, let's celebrate American democracy. We looked really good during the Cold War because everybody thought we were a beacon of light and liberty. What's happened to that? So unless they can gather together against a unifying story, they're going to be divided like this and fighting amongst themselves at a time when the world actually needs a strong democratic leader.
We're a long way from Ronald Reagan's shining city on a hill, aren't we?
And so was Ronald Reagan, but that's another story.
That's another story.
You know where he got that quote.
No, tell me.
Okay, a city upon a hill, a light to all nations, is a 17th century American Puritan quote. It's not actually in the Bible. It's two bits of scripture stuck together. But that is what the Puritans thought they were building when they first set up in New England. A city upon a hill, a light to all nations. So Ronald Reagan was deliberately quoting that and giving people a little hint about where he was coming from.
Now, I would assume you'd approve of that because the Puritans, those are your peeps, aren't they?
Oh, you don't always approve of your peeps. You know
Okay.
that. Just because they're your peeps, it allows you to say bad things about them. You know that.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, so there's pluses and minuses to them, like everybody. So there were some things that they could be admired for, and other things that they should not be admired for. And I've studied them with great interest, particularly the Salem witchcraft episode, and how that played out and how it got reversed and who apologized for it afterwards. Very interesting study.
I should ask you, because people are going to want me to be asking you about The Handmaid's Tale. So I do want to ask you at least this much about it, which is, of course, it is set in a world of sterility. Not just moral sterility, but actual sterility. And I mean, I don't want to be overly apocalyptic about this, but we did do a program on it not that long ago here on TVO, in which there are a lot of concerns that the society you depict is not that far away from us. I mean, in the Western world, I think only Israel is right now reproducing at a rate to replace their population. We certainly aren't in Canada. They're certainly not in places like Italy and Ireland, and anyway, the list goes on. What do you think this says about the future?
Oh boy, people are really studying that. So yeah, that's another reason that people are worried about the future. So, although I'm an old person, let me say that a society that's all old people is not. It's not going to be very. How shall we say? People invest their hopes for the future in young people, and if there aren't any young people, what's going to happen to those hopes for the future? So, what are we actually looking at? Are we looking at women who feel they can't afford to have that many children, or are we looking at male sterility? And it does seem to be that we are looking at both. This is going to be a big motif in the years to come, and you're going to see a lot of these things return, like increased baby bonuses and child care programs, because the way things are now, a lot of women just cannot afford, a lot of families cannot afford to have those kinds of children.
We are going through a time right now where we are having a rethinking about the advisability of having statues to people like Sir Johnny MacDonald and Egerton Ryerson up in public. And as you well know, the statues are being taken down, in some cases legally, in some cases just through vandalism. Do you have a view as to how we should be handling all of this?
Well, no. There was a reason I started the Testaments, the sequel to The Handmaid's Tale, with the unveiling of a statue. And it is a statue to Aunt Lydia, who's one of the narrators. And we find that statue much later on in the historical notes, not in good condition. So we realize that there must have been a vandalism moment. So I've watched a lot of regimes fall. And one of the things that happen when regimes fall is that statues come down. So you probably remember Ceausescu, toppling of that statue, people hitting it with shoes. And
Saddam Hussein.
Saddam,
Iron
Stalin.
Felix.
Yep, a lot. When and it goes way, way, way back. So you can go back to ancient Egypt and find these Colossus statues buried with their noses broken off and their inscriptions chiseled off. So new people come in, they want to rewrite history. They always want to.
But those are regime changes. We haven't had a regime change in Canada.
It's not an official regime change, but it's a regime change. So it's another wave of public opinion coming in. And I think Gary Young had an excellent piece about statues in the Guardian. He said, let's take them all down. Let's take them all down, because what do? They ossify history. Now, I wouldn't say take them all down, because we all have our little favorites. I like Statue of Alperdi in Queen's Park. And Statue of Alperdi even has a Twitter account in which the statue says things like, pigeon sat on me. It's actually a statue. So what are we going to make statues of? What are we going to commemorate? What is the message with any given statue or piece of public art? And how about the statue to the Canadian Air Force that's on Queen's Park? How about that? Are we going to take that down? Is it a glorification of war? I don't think so, but then I'm a very old-fashioned. What about war memorials? What about the Canadian War Museum, which is a big, giant statue? So museums, ways they commemorate the past, that's always being rewritten. If it never got rewritten, younger generations would just cease to be interested in it at all. Because unless we reinterpret things, they're dead. They're somebody else's interpretation in the past.
Yeah, fair enough. But, I did read that piece in The Guardian, and I read another piece by Jimmy Carter, the former president, who said, it's not a good idea to take statues down. Statues help us create an appreciation for history, create an opportunity for discussion, and what we need to do is put plaques or competing statues beside the existing ones that will tell a fuller story. What do you think of that idea?
Well, that's one idea. I'm not terribly invested in statues myself, and I did grow up as a young person wondering who these people were. Like there's some guys on horseback in Queen's Park. Who are they? What are they doing there? I never knew. I was more interested in the Santa Claus parade, which used to go right past them.
Well, we've now got to a point, though, where there are some municipalities in the country who are saying we're going to cancel our Canada Day July 1st celebrations because, it's all part of a colonial past that we now need to get past.
Okay, so what are they going to replace that with as a celebratory event? Because if you're a country or a society with no celebratory events, you're going to enter a state of disbelief in yourself and depression like forever. So what are you going to invent instead? Let's hear some proposals, because if you just abolish everything that exists and don't replace it with anything, what are you left with?
I'm going to, we've talked past, present, future, but I'm not done with the past yet. So I'm going back 40 years at a time when you lived in Germany and I guess had opportunities to visit communist countries that were in the neighborhood. Mm-hmm. Yep. And so you well know, as well as anybody around today, how if you said the wrong thing back then, the knock on the door in the middle of the night, and that was it for you. We don't have that today in Canada, but we have a different kind of thing. We have, if you say the wrong thing on social media, you will get the mob after you like nobody's business. And while they won't actually kill you, they could get you fired or deplatformed or cancel cultured or whatever the right expression is nowadays. Some people call that holding them to account. What do you call it?
Well, it depends what the person has done. So let's go back to facts and evidence. So facts and evidence, fair enough. No facts and no evidence, what would you call that? So back to the 17th century, you're a witch. Are we really going to do that again? So if there's a real thing that actually happened, that's one scenario. If there's an unreal thing that didn't happen and you still have the mob after you trying to get you fired, I would say that's an abuse of power. So the ability to accuse is a power. And you can abuse that power just as you can abuse any other kind of power that there is.
Social media have become very important in democracies today, though. It's a way for politicians to engage with the citizenry. It's a way for the citizenry to get a message to politicians. And it's a way for a lot of very uncivilized behavior to take place. And I know what an avid tweeter you are. And I wonder if you've got any advice for how we might we might remove some of the toxicity of Twitter and make it what it might better be, which is a more civilized place for discourse.
Yeah, so that means more civilized discourse across the board. But let me just do a McLuhan on you and walk you right back to the advent of other new technologies, such as movies when they first had a huge effect on people because they were new. It was something new and different. And whenever something new and different comes into the mix, people are mesmerized by it at first. Along comes radio. I believe that Hitler would not have had nearly the impact that he had it not been for radio and his ability to use it. So he was able to magnify his voice to a terrific extent because people were mesmerized by radio. They were sitting around their radio sets. It was something new. They were listening. It's like the voice of God going right into your ear. Along comes television. You're too young to remember TV trays and TV dinners.
No, I'm not. No, I'm
yes,
not.
You are. People sitting in front of the blue screen, and it was black and white, just eating their dinner while watching the screen. Tremendous effect at that time. And one theory is that Kennedy won the election because he had a good TV presence and Nixon did not. He didn't look good on television. So along comes the internet. Everybody's mesmerized by it. And that will go on for a while, and then it will become another medium and another set of background noise, but it won't be so terrifically all-important. And I think that people will also grasp the fact that publishing on social media is publishing. So it's like a newspaper. Oh, I forgot newspapers. Turn of the century, the Hearst newspapers, yellow journalism absolutely controlled public opinion. So you have different media replacing other ones or learning to coexist with them. But the new ones always get a lot of attention because people are speculating about them. They're new. Publishing on social media is publishing, and you can be sued for what you say there. And I think people are just now beginning to grasp that.
I guess I can say I'm a little surprised at your somewhat hopeful, optimistic look at the future of social media because, you were a signatory of that letter in Harper's Magazine in support of free speech, and you got clobbered on social media for coming to the defense of free speech. Are there days when you get despondent about the state of our culture?
No. Twitter is not a real reflection of complete public opinion. So Steve, it's a long game. So you might get clobbered in the immediate moment, but then you get all these people coming up to you and saying, I really admired the stance you took on that. So anything that you see in the media, do you know what a mushroom actually looks like? It's this huge underground network, and the mushroom that you might put in your omelet is just a little bit of it. It's what we call the fruiting body. So these little stuff that happens on social media, even in newspapers, even on shows such as yours, they're like the mushrooms. And then there's this huge underground network of people who watch the stuff and are aware of the stuff, but may not necessarily express themselves in public because they don't want the hate mail. But they have opinions, and they will let you know privately what their opinions are. So I think you do these things, you take these stands to make it so that there still are voices for free speech and reasonable discourse. And you are seeing more and more people expressing that view now. So yeah, you get people carried away by things, but any weapon like that you use can always be used against you. And when they turn around and get clobbered themselves, they realize that maybe they should have opted for free speech and rational discourse.
I think there's something fabulous about an 81-year-old author playing the long game on social media. That's pretty cool.
I think that's morbid. You shouldn't say such things. You know I'm going to live forever, Steve. Come on.
Well, all right. Let's finish up on this then. How hopeful are you still about the future of democracy, which you have called fragile, and still, in some ways, an experiment that we're figuring out?
Steve, so are mushrooms. They're very fragile to the view, but they've been around a long time. And in fact, if it weren't for fungi, you would not exist. So I'm hopeful, because why be anything else? Why give up? And when you do give up, or if you do give up, that's exactly what the opponents of democracy want you to do. So I'm hopeful, and that means that I will act against moves that I see as being directed towards eradicating democracy. And I think that as long as we all do that, should we happen to be in favor of democracy as a form of government, if we all do that, then the bad thing won't happen.
I can't thank you enough for spending so much time with us on TVO tonight. This was just a thoroughly, at least for me, I don't know what you thought, but for me, this was a thoroughly enjoyable conversation. I'm so glad we got a chance to do it, and I look forward to our next one, hopefully in person.
Well, that would be lovely. I'm playing the long game and predicting that I might actually be around for that.
I know you will be. That's Margaret Atwood. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye, Steve.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.